Will AI take your job? This is one of the questions that we explore on the Happier at Work podcast today, the award winning career and culture podcast for people first leaders. I'm your host, Aoife O'Brien. I am the career and culture strategist for global teams. And today I'm joined by Josh Drean. He shares insights from his new book, Employment is Dead. And he looks at evolving technologies. And I did ask him before we started recording, it's not just about AI, it's how we use technology at work and what the future of work looks like because of technological advancements. He shares his 10 operating principles. So what are the underlying needs that people have in order to feel fulfilled at work? So we dive into those and we look at some of the blockers that are happening in traditional employment contracts at the moment to stop us from feeling that sense of fulfillment. I really know you're going to enjoy this episode. I found it really insightful for myself, lots of new ideas, lots of things to bounce around. And I'd love to know what's one thing you're going to do differently as a result of listening to today's episode. Do let me know either in the comments or leave a rating or a review on your favorite platform. And also, don't forget to share it with a friend if you think that they would benefit from listening today. Josh, welcome to the Happier at Work podcast. I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. Do you want to let people know a little bit about your background and how you got into doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, Eva, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on the pod. I've been listening avidly, and I absolutely love the work that you're doing. I think our ethos are completely aligned. I love employee experience design, employee engagement. I like to refer to it mostly as workforce experience, but how do we design an environment and a work process that brings happiness and satisfaction to employees? So I'm happy to dig into my own little flavor of that, and how emerging technologies can facilitate that. I am co-founder of the Work3 Institute, where we marry emerging technologies with workforce strategies. I am co-author of the book Employment is Dead: How Emerging Technologies Are Revolutionizing the Way That We Work, published with Harvard Business Review Press. I am father to 3 children, which keep me very busy, 3 boys. They are my main work that I do. And yeah, I think how I fell into this space is while I was a student, I was building a startup out of the Harvard Innovation Labs. And what we wanted to build was, we called it pioneering sentiment analysis in real time. Me and my co-founder looked at these, employee engagement surveys, and we're like, this just doesn't make sense. You run a long survey that employees don't want to fill out, don't want to be honest on. It's only once a year. So it's only one touch point once a year to see how employees are feeling, how they're doing at work. And it didn't seem like anyone was doing a good job turning those results, that feedback, into action. And so we wanted to kind of get ahead of it by, let's ask a non-invasive question once a day and see if we can't get more granular on the feedback. Like, what time of day are people most engaged? What meetings do they probably disengage in? What are the cycles? What are the patterns? We got really excited about this tool, and we started, piloting it with these companies. And as young students, we just naturally thought that companies really cared or really wanted to know how employees are feeling. And unfortunately, we learned the hard way that a lot of times companies don't. We had a pilot group one time, just decided they were going to drop out. They didn't want to run the surveys because they were afraid what they were going to hear from employees. They kind of had a gut feeling, right, of how employees were feeling at the organization. They didn't want to, crystallize that into feedback. We had another company who ran the survey and then saw the results and buried them. They didn't want anyone to see them. They didn't transparently share them with employees. And we started to notice, like, the message you're sending to employees is detrimental. You're asking for honest feedback, and you are burying the results. And unfortunately, it gets even worse that some companies would use that feedback against employees, right? It's an anonymous survey, as employees truly don't believe. And then they go out and they are afraid that if they say how they really feel, that it will be used as means for termination. So it was my first, as a young student, ignorant and happy, realizing that like there are companies doing it right for sure, but the vast majority of companies seem to not want to know how
Yeah.
employees are feeling because it can feel threatening.
Yeah, it's like there's so much that I want to unpack from what you've just introduced there. And I think for me, it's taking a step back to what you spoke about a second ago, this, how you described it as the workforce experience. In your words, why do you think it's important?
Uh, Primarily because if we can't design an employee experience that employees want to have, AI will do it for us, or they will leave for alternative work ecosystems. You look at the younger generation and they are interested in entrepreneurship. They don't trust the social work contract that seems less secure than ever before as they're seeing mass layoffs, as they are watching AI potentially take their job, watching pensions dry up, not being able to afford a living, not being able to afford a house, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of challenges that especially the emerging generation, the emerging workforce is facing. And if we are just using these old traditional ways of engagement, the carrot and the stick, if you will, it's like that doesn't serve them. And so if we are not intentional about the employee experience, they will leave.
Yeah. Yeah. So in a nutshell, they'll leave. And as an organization, that's going to cost you money, basically. I'm really
That is
curious
right.
about what you're saying as this young graduate student in Harvard and realizing that actually, from the science of it, companies don't actually care that much about this, and they want to either hide. Why do you think that is? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. It took a while to kind of uncover, to be honest, but it's short-term shareholder value is the
Ah, of
name of the
course.
game.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So when you really unpack it, right, we have all of the data right in front of us. It's like Gallup will publish this report. Disengagement is the highest it's ever been. Today,
yeah,
79% of employees are either not engaged or actively
yeah,
disengaged.
yeah.
And that costs $7.8 trillion globally. So it's like
It's
a huge,
91% in Ireland.
ooh,
91%. Yeah, it's crazy. Only
wow.
9% of employees in Ireland are engaged.
That is honestly, it's probably because you are honest on the reports. I have a feeling the number is much higher, right? It is dismal to hear
Yeah,
those numbers, and we have the solution right in front of us, right? A happy employee is a productive employee.
yeah,
Productivity equals ROI.
yeah. But it's the
But
short term focus.
it's this balance, right? Of like, well, that takes a long time. Culture is hard to build. It takes a long time. We have these deliverables for Q3 that have to get done. Like any dollar extra that we spend on the employee experience, whether it's into their salary or for benefits, is a dollar taken away from shareholders. And so we've kind of created this system that doesn't serve employees, even though I think about how obsessed we are about the customer experience. Like we got to nail it because they have options and they are going to take their business elsewhere if we can't get it. And yet, when we look at the employee experience, it feels like we're still treating them like office equipment.
Yeah. And I often think, when I think about happiness at work, it's happier employees equal happier customers. Like if you can keep your employees happy, they're the ones who are keeping the customers happy. And you want to have customers because if you don't have customers, then you don't have a business. And if you don't have employees, you also don't have a business. And, we won't go down the AI road just yet. Like, AI can't do every single thing in your organization for you. You do still have to have that human, I think, for now anyway. Touch wood, for the time being, we still need humans to work in organizations. So, this focus on the short term and taking that money away at the expense of longer term shareholder value, like that's really what's driving this.
100%. And I think it was all exposed and laid bare during the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to see a lot of companies who were paying lip service to the employee experience. And especially you'll notice when everyone went remote, forced to because of the pandemic,
Yeah, yeah.
it was like, we are going to keep it this way because we care about our employees and we want them to be happy. So remote work is here to stay. And look how long that lasted.
Yes.
It's
Now we're
this
back to the office,
Yeah.
people. 5 days a week, please. Yeah.
That's it. And when you see it, the pendulum swung so hard from the Great Resignation over to an employer's market,
Yeah.
right? Employees are staying longer at their job. There's less options. The job market is absolutely horrendous right now. And they leverage their power to do things like lowball candidates because they might be desperate, or threaten employees who are completely burned out within the organization with a potential layoff. You need to perform more. They will quiet promote, which is you get a promotion with the extra job responsibilities, but you don't get the pay bump. And so,
I've been there. Yeah.
you know,
You get it on paper, but you don't get it in paper.
I like that. Yes,
I
exactly.
just made it up.
That's perfect. Let that be the title of the episode. And the thing that I find interesting is, like, you find this balance between trust and control within organizations. Like, the more you seek to control employees, quiet promote, tell them, exactly how they need to be, micromanage them, they're going to find ways to push back against that. And we're seeing an entire generation quiet quit, which is, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. You can bring us back to the office, you can't make us work. And so TikTok is flooded with videos of younger generation just pretending to be productive. And that is bad for their career development. It is bad for the productivity of the company.
Yeah.
And yet we're just doing it,
Yeah.
like there's no relatively no change.
And yet it's funny for me watching those videos because I can relate and remember what it was like working in that kind of environment as well. Josh, something tells me from everything that you're saying here that you have some answers in relation to what we can actually do to address some of these things. Maybe take us on the journey from, okay, I had this realization that a once a year survey is not good, and then a more frequent survey, actually a lot of companies don't really care enough to want to know that because it's all about the short term, and then taking the leap into what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was first showing the base model of our tool to my wife, so excited. I was like, look at all the things that it can do. Look at the survey, how it pops up. She's a marriage and family therapist. And after I showed her it, her only response was, it sounds kind of silly that you would build relationships at work through a survey. And it really stuck with me because when you look at what employment actually is, it's not a relationship. It's a contract.
Yeah.
From the beginning of the industrial age, it was just a contract that we signed. You are giving me X amount of hours every single day, and I will give you Y amount of dollars. And somehow we have maintained that model through decades of evolution, through to now the age of information, where a contract and sitting at a desk for 9 hours a day doesn't actually equal productivity. It might have been when you were in a factory pushing a button, but we are all doing much different work. And so that is the premise of the book that my co-author, Deborah Perry-Pashoni, and I have written. It came out in January of this year. We're really excited about it. The title is boldly, Employment is Dead. The premise is that traditional models of employment are failing to adapt to the needs of the modern workforce. That we have a lot of different expectations on what role work will play in our lives, how we fulfill that role, how we are compensated for that work. And so very specifically, we write about the 10 operating, to answer your question, right? This is the 10 operating principles of Work3, the non-negotiables of the modern workforce. I often talk to people leaders across the globe, and I show them these 10 operating principles, which are, as I said, it's a partnership, moving beyond the contract to working with a company, not for a company. Transparency, autonomy, having ownership over the work that you do, decision-making power, flexibility, upskilling, incentives, interoperability, and community. We don't have to touch on all of these, but they are demanding a different type of work. They want a relationship. They want to bring their full selves to work. They want to be able to work according to their circadian rhythm, not have to sit at a desk 9 to 5 and then try to figure out how to juggle all the domestic responsibilities while they're being emailed after hours by their boss, right? Like there's this always on 24/7 culture that has creeped up, that has changed the game around what it means to have a 9 to 5. And so I believe that the companies that are willing to take a hard look at the way that they've organized work and are willing to make some changes, specifically around the relationship that they have with their employees, that those are going to be the companies that are going to win, regardless of what AI brings, regardless of, and might I say that we are seeing it play out spectacularly right now to companies who are holding to their values and those who are changing with, political tides.
Yeah. Any examples that you'd like to share from what's going on?
Just comes to mind because I stayed tuned on the large corporations. You watch the difference between Target and Costco right now. Target decided to abandon quietly their DE&I efforts. Didn't sit well with their target audience at all. And they have been weeks now of just customers boycotting, not shopping at the store anymore, reclaiming kind of their funding. And it's just a mess, right? You can see their value dipping. Whereas Costco pulled all of their shareholders together and made a vote, and they overwhelmingly voted to keep their DE&I efforts, which showed their clients and their customers that they truly matter. And, lines are out the door at Costco.
Yeah.
So that could be just one example of what it looks like to
But
change.
dare I say, for a retailer, surely you want the people in your organization to be representative of your customers, and your customers are representative of the population, and therefore you need to have some sort of DE&I policy in your organization in order to support that, in order to reflect that, in order to help people to grow at work.
Aoife, that logic is so simple and so sound. Thank you for just saying it how it is. Wow, if only we could do that, right?
If only we could do that. If only we had a choice in the matter. If only we could decide for ourselves what to do. Isn't that it? Josh, something I picked up on before you shared the operating principles is this idea of needs and expectations. So to give a bit of context, the research I did as part of my master's, I looked at needs satisfaction specifically at work. And so I looked at our universal needs through the self-determination theory. So our need for autonomy, relatedness and competence. And beyond just the satisfaction of that need, it's the balance. So you mentioned about control and trust, whereas I'm looking at things like direction and control. So giving people control over what they're doing and how they're doing it, but also providing them with the guidance and direction of what it is that they need to deliver on, and being really clear and setting those clear expectations. And interestingly, on the topic of expectations, last week I ran a webinar all about expectations, the expectations we have of ourselves, the expectations we place on others, and the expectations that others have on us, because I think those kinds of things shape our experience of work. And now here you are sharing that same kind of language as well. So I just wanted to reinforce the importance of needs and expectations for what it is that we're talking about before we kind of go into some of the operating principles. Anything to add on what I've said?
Yeah, I mean, we're actually jumping right into the operating principles as you mentioned that, right? Autonomy is a big part of that, right? Yeah. Again, work has been designed to be we're button pushers. You have a job description, you fit within that job description. You're probably doing 1% of what you really like to do. Yeah. The rest is just like bureaucratic, like it's inefficient. And so when we talk about autonomy, this is giving employees the ability to make decisions quickly and efficiently, confidently, based on their potential role. Like they know that their contribution matters, and with the right systems in place, you can empower them to do their best work. I think a great example is Bill Anderson with Bayer last year. He's the CEO of Bayer, and last year they did away with middle management and threw out 99% of their corporate handbook. The reason why is because he said increasingly they couldn't get anything done. It was just too hard to get ideas approved. There were too many too much red tape, too many layers of approval. And so the idea was to kind of give them this dynamic shared ownership, is what they call it.
Yeah.
The idea is to give them the autonomy to do the work that we have entrusted them to do and to trust that they can do it without having
Yeah.
to micromanage them.
Yes, I love that. Sounds like it was really bureaucratic before, and I've been there working in an organization where to try and send a corporate email, you had to get approval from a 40,000 person organization. We had to get approval from one of two people based in the US for a marketing email to be sent to the local clients in Ireland. So I have definitely been there, and I wish that that company had thrown out the corporate handbook as well.
That is rough. My goodness.
Yeah.
Talk
And you
about
can
really
imagine
trusting
how
your
long it
people.
gets. You can talk about how long it takes to get approved. I think the reasoning behind it, I do understand. The reasoning behind it is to make sure we use the proper branding. It would have been before the GDPR rules and regulations around that, but it was probably something to do with data privacy and how we used. And I think only one or two people had access to use the software as well.
Justify it
Employees there
however
within the
you want,
organization.
Aoife. Justify it however you want. It sounds
I don't
very,
like
for
it.
a company that large, it sounds like
Yeah.
they have a hard time delegating. But
Yes.
that's just my
Yeah.
surface level
So
opinion.
back to the operating principles then, are there any? I'm imagining that they're all really important, and trying to pick one is maybe like trying to pick one of your children, but are there some that stand out more than others, or that some are more important in specific contexts, for example in business?
Yeah, well, I would say that some are more relevant right now, and some
Okay.
will be much more relevant down the road. So
Okay.
flexibility right now is extremely relevant, right? It
Yeah.
was everyone started working remote. We kind of cracked the code on what that looked like. The reports seemed to show that remote work works, and then we saw the RTO movement of companies bringing everyone back, and I loved how they pinned it on company culture. Just we're better when we're all together. When we're in the room, we can be more creative and more productive together. And when you really unpack that, it's like you can't pull the wall over employees' eyes. They know that the culture is not what you say it is because they're
Yeah.
in the trenches experiencing the subculture of the organization.
Yeah.
Or, they can read the reports, they can see that real estate becomes a part of the decision, or
Yeah.
being able to control what you are doing and see everything that you are working on over trusting that what you're doing at home. Like, let's move away from this. Let's measure time spent at the office to let's measure the output.
Yeah.
Let's measure
Totally. Yeah.
the value that you generated. That's a
We're
very different thing. It's hard to embrace that if you are still kind of operating on this traditional model.
Yeah. And I think, well, there's a few things I think to unpack with that, Josh. It's defining clearly, here's the outcomes that we expect you to produce. But going back to this idea of expectations, that requires that a leader sets those really clear expectations and knows what is expected of them. And when there's a lack of clarity around that, I think it makes it much harder to talk about those kinds of things. And it's much easier to measure how long someone is in the office or how long they're active on their laptop or whatever it might be, to say and to measure that as productivity, as what they're actually producing. But that's, as you and I both know, that's not the case. So it's a mindset shift to move over to this: what are the outcomes I'm expected to deliver? And if I deliver those outcomes in 2 hours, then that's okay. Can I move on to something else? Or how does that work? And if I have this extra time because I've delivered on what I said I would deliver on, then it's an opportunity to redefine my role, or it's an opportunity to work on something that I'm more passionate about, or catch up on some of that admin that's been backing up as well. I think the big challenge is defining what those outcomes really are without the clarity that you really need, and shifting priorities as well, as both of us I think
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Well, I think, Eva, what you're touching on here is kind of kind of the technology side of things that we touch on in the book, right? How do we give employees some of these things? And what you're saying here is very important, right? It's that like we need to define what is the real problem here. Is it defining a job role better? Is it time management? Is it value generation itself as it hooks up to the rest of the organization? And what's exciting is that AI can help with a lot of this, and this concept of a smart contract can help as well, which is AI. Let's take a scenario where like you have a group of people who all have a vision on where they want to go and how they want to get there. Who does what work? How fast are they doing the work? There's a lot of work to do to get it into scope. But if you could use AI to help you get it there, and even more so, if you had a smart contract, when I say smart contract, all this is like a digital contract that executes, it self-executes, meaning once you hit a milestone, it executes. It can deliver compensation. It can deliver the next piece of the work. Whatever you decide the smart contract says and does can help you do it. And so if we're talking a little bit further down the road, there is a work environment where that job isn't HR's department. That is, the work of AI and the smart contracts. And then me as not even an employee of an organization, I could be a core contributor, which is, I come and go and contribute to this one organization. I could be a bounty hunter, as we call it in Work3, which is, let me work on some projects at this organization while I'm working on some projects over here, I'm just highly specialized skills. I can jump and work how I want. And now all of a sudden the work it's still done by humans, but it is organized by AI, which is kind of an interesting take on the future of work.
I think that's such a brilliant idea. Can we take maybe a little step back and address some of the fears that some people have when it comes to AI? Like for me, I don't know how long I've been using it, but it's been at least a couple of years now. I can't imagine life without it. I've introduced some of my friends to AI only very recently, and they're saying the same thing. I don't know how I actually existed before, because I can get so much more done now that I have AI. So maybe addressing some of the resistance around embracing AI in how we organize work and how we get stuff done, first of all. And interestingly, I heard Sam Altman talking about ChatGPT earlier today. It was just a snippet of a video, and he was saying different generations use ChatGPT for different functions. So older generations, like I think he was saying, like people in their 40s, like myself, are using AI like Google, and they'll just type in something that they would have previously put into Google. Whereas the kind of 20 and 30-year-olds are using it for life advice. And then the college students are using it as an entire operating system, because they're the digital natives and they're used to just embracing these new technologies. So maybe talk about some of the resistance around using AI generally, and maybe more specifically in how we organize our work, and then we can talk about some of the solutions around that.
Yeah, I did see that clip as well. I think it was Sam Altman who was saying that, and he nailed me as a millennial. The 30s and 40-year-olds using it this way, I'm like, yeah. And then the younger generation using it as an operational system. It is fascinating to see that, to hear it, and what does that even mean, right?
I asked ChatGPT. I went straight onto ChatGPT and I said, how can I use ChatGPT as an operating system? So now I'm setting it up as an operating system.
There you go. I think the first step is giving it a name, right? Like, hey, Johnny, or whatever.
For me, it's ChatGPT, and it's totally a guy, and I don't know why it is, but it just is.
That's too funny. Yeah. There's a lot there. As someone who is fascinated about work specifically and how AI is shifting work, I think the question comes up a lot: will AI take our jobs? And the fact that no one can give a straight answer right now is enough to fear. And honestly, fear away, because that's where we are at. But my hot take on it is that, having used AI deeply for writing books and doing other things, it's an incredible tool. It is a game-changing tool. Yeah. It does not replace us. I think the companies that are sold on AI will replace my workforce are completely missing the point, because guess what? They are kind of the contract generation. Like, they look at employees as a tool to get a job done. They look at their workforce as a very expensive overhead. And so if you look at work as it stands today, right, we're just task completers. We're just button pushers. And so if you are looking for a button pusher, a task completer, AI, yeah, will replace those roles because it's really good at automation. It's really good at completing tasks. But that's not what we're good at. That's not what we went to college for. That's not, there's so much more there that we just have yet to tap into. What about the critical thinking? What about the collaboration? What about building trust? Here's a great example that's playing out right now in spectacular fashion on TikTok. This concept of an AI interview just hit the shelves, and these companies are paying lots of money as they're looking for a candidate to hire. The idea is, what if we could scale the amount of interviews we did to AI? And so now you're seeing like these TikTokers post, I was so excited, I finally got an interview, and it was just an AI chatbot. And there's videos of them glitching out on a word, and it never finishes, and they never got to get it right. And so I think from an HR's perspective, sure, like, it sounds nice to be able to scale that up and get more people data into the system. However, I think we are sacrificing this fundamental part of hiring, which is that human connection. And if your candidate feels like you're using AI as a proxy for human interaction, it can feel like you're missing the point. It can feel like I wouldn't want to work for you because that's not what I'm into. And if AI really is taking my job, why is AI not just doing the job and you're looking for a candidate, right? So I want to call BS a little bit on a lot of that, because those who have the mindset of work is a relationship, our people matter, we are learning how to engage Gen Z, are going to be doing much better than those who are trying to outsource everything to AI and think that that's going to solve all their problems.
Yeah. When I don't have to deal with people and AI is just pushing buttons for me, then I'm going to be really successful and earn loads of money. It's like, no, that's not how it works, because not only is work built on relationships, sales are built on relationships as well. So you need to have people building those genuine connections with customers in order to have a successful company, I would argue.
Yeah, and here's an interesting article that came out. It was entitled, "Is AI driving efficiency or fueling burnout?" It essentially stated that 96%, all of C-suite leadership expect AI tools to increase the company's overall productivity. But 47% of employees who are actually using AI say they don't know how to use it to meet their employer's productivity expectations. And then you have 77% saying that these tools have actually decreased their productivity and added to their workload. I thought the point of AI was to reduce workloads. And the problem is that we're chasing the shiny rock, right? We're chasing this new technology. We're purchasing it. We're putting it in the hands of employees, and we're asking them to pull productivity out of thin air. And that is not how you will realize the expected productivity gains of AI. You have to be strategic. And the strategy that you use is most likely going to be something that you've been using for a long time. It's, who are the people, the stakeholders? What's the process? And once we have all those pieces in place, then let's go find the tools that can help us get there, not the other way around.
Yes. Yeah. And I was, again, listening to another podcast recently where they talked about exactly the same thing, that sometimes we find the tool and we try and shoehorn what it is that we're doing into the tool, rather than thinking, what's the problem that we're trying to solve here, and what's the best tool to solve that problem? Not just look to see what's the most popular tool at the moment and let's get that and try and shoehorn it. Dare I say as well, Josh, that beyond just trying to understand what we're trying to solve here, it comes back to this idea of expectations and having that clarity to begin with. So what are the expected outcomes here, and how to teach people how to use this stuff?
Yeah, another 10 operating principles is upskilling, right? The half-life of skills. I think someone said that, with AI, skills will be obsolete every 2 years now, which is hard to hear, especially when you have, I just spent 4 years going to school, getting my degree, can't find a job right now, lots of student debt,
Yeah.
no jobs are available, right? There's a lot of challenges
Yeah.
right there. And so I there's two camps here. We're going to
Mm.
oversimplify things.
Yeah.
There's the camp that believes that AI is the solve to all of our workforce problems, and they're going to do everything they can to run at it and automate it. And, that's your prerogative. Go. There are other companies who are like, we're going to use AI. However, we're going to use it to augment the potential of our people. We're
Yes.
going to
Yeah.
upskill them.
Mm.
We're going to teach them how to use it so well that they 10x their productivity, 50x their productivity, 100x, right? So I find the reductionist, we're saving on our headcount,
Mm.
isn't going to work as well as, wow, we have these people. They are incredible and they are going to do amazing things with
Yeah.
AI.
Mm.
Let's empower them. Is
Yes.
a much more important approach.
Yeah, like let's help them, like you say, to 10x or 100x their productivity by using AI, as opposed to AI is going to replace them and their jobs. It's like, no, let's take away the mundane, repetitive tasks that AI could potentially do, give them the human tasks, the critical thinking, the relationship building, and let's see where we can take our organization that way. So I love that approach. Do you have any specific recommendations on how to use AI in the workplace to do that?
Yeah, I mean, the first step is if you have never used AI, start using it, right?
Mm.
Like, it sounds like you were a bit of an early adopter, Aoife. You were sharing it around with your friends and kind of helping people understand how it feels, where it's at, starting to recognize its limitations. I think that was a big part for me is like, oh, so this isn't the big old amazing thing that everyone's been talking about. And I
Yes.
fully recognize that like we could both be completely wrong. Maybe like the AI apocalypse is upon us. And
The robots are taking over.
yeah, it very well could be.
Yeah.
I don't know if that is a great way to live to just
Skynet is calling.
Skynet. Yes, we're just sitting here twiddling our thumbs, waiting for it. I think pushing the ball forward in a positive way using AI is the right fit. But I would say again, like it's so basic. It's just like you have to understand how to use it before you can
Yeah.
even formulate expectations.
Yeah.
You need to get it into the hands of your employees so that they can be using it. I would say a huge thing that a lot of companies can do right now that I guarantee you probably aren't is understand how your employees are using AI today to do their
Yeah.
normal job functions.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I guarantee I've got a presentation, I'm plugging it into ChatGPT to see how I can make it better. I've got an email to send, I'm plugging it in to make sure that it's not as angry as it might otherwise be. And when you start to learn those nuances, you start to realize like, oh, well, you're actually automating 80% of your job. Let's like carve out the rest of your time doing creative work, doing some of the stuff that matters much more than the cog used to be.
Mm.
How can you be innovative? How can you do things differently? And that's just touching the surface, right? What we do at the Work3 Institute is where are you at your organization? A lot of times we start with a 101 course, which is run an employee engagement survey. You haven't done one. Do sentiment analysis in real time. Here's the tool. Then there's like a 201, which is like, let's figure out how to use AI. And then we have full blown companies who are working on a Web3 model, which is they are a decentralized autonomous organization. They run outside of leadership. They have no managers. It's very flat. It's very transparent. They are working in a way that everyone has decision-making power at the organization. Anyone can propose a decision that needs to be made. You can vote immediately on a tool called Snapshot, and a smart contract executes the direction that the company heads. If you want to talk about moving with speed and agility, that's where it's happening.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds incredible. And I was going to bring us on to that because I know your book talks more than just about AI. It's about disruptive technology in general. So do you want to introduce people a little bit more to that concept of what does that mean for the workplace and work of the future and what to expect, which from where I'm sitting and what you're talking about earlier, like this idea of, it sounds kind of like the gig economy, but a much more organized way of doing it. Like that sounds like a perfect solution for someone like me.
That's exactly right. It's the gig economy on steroids. It's the Web3 version of the gig economy. Simply put, the premise for me starts with, again, the employee expectations, the 10 operating principles. They don't want to work in an office. They want to have autonomy. They want to have ownership over the work. Like if they are generating a lot of value for the company, they feel like they should be compensated accordingly.
Yes.
And so if you can't give them that within a traditional employment model, which is traditionally extractive, again, I got you for 9 hours. You do exactly what I say, nothing
Yeah.
outside of that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
might have a good idea every once in a while, but you're not
Mm.
incentivized to tell me about it because we're just going to steal it and use it for
Exactly.
our own benefit. But
Yeah.
if you
You're
change the
paying for
narrative to where,
people's hands rather than their brains and their hearts.
ooh,
Yeah.
another title for the episode. If that's that was probably like the top of your paper. But I love that a lot. I think that's really it, right? Like the gig economy is I will say this, the decentralized gig economy, and if we
Mm.
need to make the connection there, a centralized organization is essentially there are a few decision makers at top who say exactly what needs to happen at the organization. They make all the decisions and they benefit from all of the revenue. A decentralized organization means more of a peer-to-peer relationship where if I provide you a service, it's a transaction between you and me. We don't need no middleman for that.
Mm.
That's why, the gig economy or the creator economy or the economy of like, let's look at Uber, um, or Airbnb. You have a service that you are providing. There's this middleman sitting there that takes a large chunk of the revenues in order to operate. And so like it's becoming less and less viable to be a driver for this company as your main source of income. If you had a decentralized version of this, it would be all on the blockchain. What that means is that the app runs independent of, the people who are in charge of that app. Or when you get paid, you actually get a majority of the money that you made instead of Upwork, which is the main gig economy platform, taking a large cut of that. So it not only that, it kind of creates this world. We already talked about this a little bit. Is like, what if you could verify your skills instantaneously? Right
Mm.
now, you can't. You have a resume that you put in front of an employer, and they might believe you or they might not, and you might have lied or we don't know, right? How can
Yeah.
we verify that you have those skills? Well, what if a Web3 model for work can verify? It's like you have earned these skills, you have worked with these clients. It's now immutably imprinted on the blockchain. What that means is now AI can actually match you with projects across several different organizations that actually match your skill set perfectly.
Mm.
Oh, and by the way, you're a single mother and you only want to work for 3 hours during the day. Uh, Put that in your
That's fine.
preferences.
Yeah.
And you
Mm.
go off and you do it.
Yeah.
You can work as much or as little as possible, and this is independent of working directly for an organization.
Mm.
A lot of questions come up around this of like, what about the ethics? What about how will I get my benefits? But I think that there are individuals like Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn, who are big proponents of this Web3 gig economy, and he predicts that by 2034, all jobs will be obsolete. And don't err. He's not saying AI will take your job. What he's saying is that it will actually be more lucrative and pay more for you to work in this model once the technology is officially in place.
Okay, yeah. No, you've intrigued me enough, and I know before we hit the record button, we had a brief chat about what this means. And interestingly, very early in my business journey, I shared some of those ideas that we're talking about now with someone. And I guess it was the wrong person because she just couldn't get what I was talking about. And it just leads me to believe that for a long time I've been speaking to the wrong people. They don't see the opportunity, they don't see the potential in these kinds of things, and being able to verify people's skills, and like the added thing of knowing how many of those skills exist and therefore how valuable those skills are, I think is really, really important as well. So if you have a verifiable skill of, I think coding is probably an easier one to talk about because you could probably verify it much more easily, and say there's only a handful of people in your location or in this market that, or pool of people that we're looking in, then that skill becomes a lot more valuable than if you had that same skill but in a saturated market.
Yeah, exactly. I think we are definitely moving away from experience to
Oh, good,
skills-based
good.
learning.
Yeah, because
C- uh,
experience means nothing. Experience, the number of years of experience means nothing.
yeah, I mean, I've got my piece of paper on the wall right here. This is my college degree. Can I tell you exactly, like, can I verify that I learned anything there? I have maybe some transcripts that might help, but that doesn't translate in. And the sad part is that a lot of companies are abandoning the, you know, the college degree requirement because they're finding exactly that. We don't know if you have the skill or not. And so you're seeing, at least in the hiring process,
Mm.
an abandoning of experience-based hiring to skills-based hiring. And if you want
Yeah,
to take that very literally, like here's your action step within your organization. If you want to start implementing an internal a talent marketplace like Gloat or Fuel 50, these are companies that will help you find untapped resources and skills at your organization. It will help you pull teams together that you might not have seen before. It's essentially an internal gig economy, if you will. And you can essentially allow employees to, I'm not quite sure the verification process there, but once you have verified that you have the skill, now you will be eligible to work on projects that you never would have had a chance to otherwise. Because again, a manager is sitting over you that says no, or you're just siloed within your department.
yeah. Well, you don't have visibility on what's happening in these other areas. You don't even know, and you're working on something. Maybe it's not to your strengths, or you don't have that skill particularly. And I think we alluded to it at the start of the conversation that there's so much untapped potential. You're working on maybe 10% of what you could potentially do if you're unleashed to do all the things that you're really brilliant at. Josh, I think we could continue this conversation for hours, but in the interest of time, is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap things up?
Uh, there's obviously a lot to go through, but I do at the end here kind of think about your final question, which I believe is how
What does
how to be.
being happier at work mean to you?
Yeah. What is being happier at work? It goes back to meaning and purpose for me. Is the work that you're doing meaningful? Are you connected to a bigger purpose? Do you feel like you are contributing to something bigger than just yourself? I feel like that is an innate human desire, and we are naturally industrious. We naturally want to work hard.
Mm.
And so when you blame this entire, you know, disengaged workforce, they don't want to work anymore. I don't think that covers the whole picture. I think the picture is if we cannot figure out how to unlock that meaning and purpose for employees, they're not going to be incentivized to work harder for us. And I hate the idea of saying, come work for us, like work for you, leading into a bigger group that allows us to together create meaning and purpose while we are here on this earth. I think that is where true happiness comes from.
Brilliant. I love that. And if people want to find out more about you, about the book, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, you can pick up the book on Amazon. I'm highly active on my socials at Josh Drean. You'd probably hear from me quicker if you reached out to me on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, but I'm also on LinkedIn. Please send me a message. I would love to continue the conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today and your insights. I love this. And I, as my action point, I'm going to start researching everything Web3 now to figure out, well, how do I understand more about this and what the future of work might actually look like?
That's awesome, Aoife. Thank you so much for having me.